We heard the moving song Tears in Heaven, and it always makes us feel more determined, more aware of our need to fight in order to stop these things from happening again, in order to keep all those close to our heart dear and close to us against this terrorism that is ever expanding. These days in the Middle East there are two central axes of terrorism and Islamic Jihad. The Shiite axis led by Iran and the Sunni axis, the extreme axis, where the IS and Al-Qaeda are the leaders. And between these two axes there are relations of competition and mutual hostility against the backdrop of the Shiite-Sunni conflict. But for Israel and the West, both axes are a real imminent threat against them. And it's important to emphasize that the war Iran is fighting against the IS in Syria and Iraq does not lessen by any way the hostility and hatred it harbors for Israel and the West. And the same is true for the IS and for Al-Qaeda. And therefore, it's important for us to emphasize to the West and to the United States that the perception whereby the enemy of my enemy is my friend does not apply in the case of Iran, and the Shiite threat led by Iran should be viewed as dangerous as the Sunni threat, and perhaps even more dangerous because of Iran's capabilities as a regional superpower. The Iranian Shiite axis, since the establishment of the revolutionary regime in the 1970s, the end of the 1970s, Iran has been determined to export its revolutionary model to the entire Middle East. Iran has become the sponsor of terrorist organizations against Israel that are specifically undermining with Iran to eliminate Israel. And so Iran has helped to improve and build the military force of Hezbollah, while relying on the Lebanese minority and identifying with the Alawite minority in Syria led by Assad. Iran is also expanding its impact to the Palestinian arena through the Islamic Jihad, through Hamas, with which it is holding ties because of mutual and common interests to undermine Israel and eliminate it. The Sunni-Shiite conflict has exacerbated and has deepened Iranian involvement in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, while it is also taking advantage of the conflict to make itself more powerful. Iran, its impact is well felt in Yemen. Its allies have taken over large areas of Yemen that are now in conflict with Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries that are trying to fight against this trend. Iran is also trying to destabilize other countries where there are Shiite minorities such as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. The Iranian impact across the Middle East that is attempting to position it as a superpower is making it the threat to Israel ever more imminent. We see that Iran is already trying to achieve its goal to increase terrorism against Israel on two other fronts. The first front is the Golan Heights, where Iran is directly trying to navigate and put together terrorism and trying to harm Israeli civilians. We are preparing to act against this, and the main thing that the Iranian leaders have set for themselves, and we have to take good, careful attention of this. This is a lesson learned by them from Operation Protective Edge, is to arm and to build a terrorist infrastructure also in Judea and Samaria, a similar terrorist infrastructure to the one that they have attempted and have helped build in the Gaza Strip. They have also said that if this infrastructure is to be built, it will be a jumping point for hurting civilians in Israel that are living near Judea and Samaria. And of course, we must do everything in our power in order to thwart these threats. Another threat that I have said is now developing in recent years against the backdrop of the wars in Syria, Libya, Iraq, and other countries is the revolutionary axis by the Sunni jihadist organizations such as ISIS, IS, or Al-Qaeda. The IS has set a target for itself to have a caliphate set up in the areas under its control in Syria and Iraq. It is also looking to countries such as Jordan, and of course a conflict is also underway in the Lebanese front and other places. We are also identifying it being active in the Sinai Peninsula, and a local organization has actually subjected itself or subordinated itself to ISIS in terms of its ideology. It's accepted its rule and the ties that they are holding, and Hamas is now in a position that is very deep in terms of its ties, the relationship it has with the terrorist activists in the Sinai Peninsula that are, of course, acting against Egypt in order to undermine the Egyptian regime and also against Israel. And there have been some dimensions of practical conflict that has taken the form of terrorist attacks and other things that we must prepare for. The ideology is, as I've said, clear, the Salafi jihadist ideology that wants to eliminate Western impact in the Middle East and to have a new order, new Islamic order that will then expand to the rest of the world. And in this respect, Arab regimes that do not share this extreme line are also prime enemies and key targets of this organization in order to bring about the collapse of the regime and, in fact, a shift of powers. It is important to emphasize that the common denominator, the common ground in order to have a new Islamic order is to eliminate or annihilate the state of Israel and to have the Palestinian areas moved to Islamic regime. And against this backdrop, there is also a conflict for collaboration between the Sinai front that is subordinate to ISIS and the military arm of Hamas. And without a doubt, one of the closest targets for attempts of takeover is the Gaza Strip itself. It's the people of Gaza who, to them, serve as a target population that meets all of its criteria. It is Sunni. It has been made extreme in terms of religiousness. It is in distress, and such an organization will tap into this distress in order to try and take hold there. I definitely anticipate that in the coming years we will have a conflict that in the Gaza Strip in an attempt for ISIS to take over from Hamas in Gaza Strip. The agenda of ISIS is to raise identification or sympathy among young people in the Muslim world and also in Europe and other places. Thousands of warriors are already going to Syria in order to take part of jihad, and also organizations, as I've said, outside the Syrian-Iraqi arena that until now have been active independently in the Maghreb countries and are now willing to be part of ISIS and form part of the regional system of the organization. So ISIS's ideology is an ideology that comes to replace the Arab regimes. Even if they are powerful in military terms, they will of course become stronger because Iraq is getting stronger, and we're talking about ISIS coming in from outside and complementing the internal affair, and that is why that is a problem for the Arab regimes that have chosen not to go down this road. As far as we're concerned, we view ISIS, we see them already in the Sinai Peninsula. We will see them much more active in the Gaza Strip, and of course we see it in Syria, even if it's not very close to the border with Israel, but it's definitely there, and we must be prepared from all angles. Today, Israel and the entire West is coping with these two axes, the Shiite axis, the Shiite terrorism and revolution, and the Sunni axis. And the understanding is that there is a common denominator between these two axes, and that is annihilating the state of Israel and removing the Western impact. It now seems that Israel and the United States are more focused on the threat of the Sunni ISIS axis and the threats posed by ISIS, and most of the resources are allocated to hurting or harming these organizations. And in this situation, Israel must give the Western decision makers all the information, having them protect our interests and their interests, and also the threat from Iran to our status and existence in the Middle East. It is important that the Western countries internalize this, that the battle against ISIS does not make Iran and the West have any common interest. We hear almost every day the supreme leader of Iran who is saying to his people and to his regime and to his civilians all the messages of hatred towards the United States and of course Israel. And he emphasizes that regardless of this agreement or this nuclear arrangement, which is a big controversial issue in and of itself, it has no impact on anything else and will not lead to any collaboration. Of course, the battle that we are having is a combined military and intelligence battle. The importance of intelligence is increasing because the war of intelligence is now a key war, a central war. And I'm happy to see here the people who have founded this entire internal security system after 9/11, and of course everyone who is engaging in this area. We in Israel will do everything in our power to be in the forefront of the cyber solutions or the intelligence systems. In order to prepare for this, we have to do more than we have ever done before, when it was always vis-a-vis regimes that were more expected and predictable in their conduct than those we are facing today. We are, of course, committed to deterrence, to prevention, and to terminating these capabilities when they become threatening, imminent threat. And again, I would like to emphasize the Iranian method, whereby they use proxies. Iran builds, arms, trains. Just recently, 4 Hamas activists were caught on their way to Iran, engaging in activity of naval warfare, and they have been apprehended, and there is now a disagreement between the Egyptians and the Hamas leadership over this. This is proof that Iran is never stopping for a moment from arming Hamas as a military arm, that as far as Iran is concerned, is there in order to harm Israel on behalf of Iran. And everything we're saying about Hamas, we can also say even more strongly and concretely about Hezbollah. I would like to congratulate Professor Uriel Reichman, the president of the IDC Herzliya, and my daughter is also studying there, which is why I'm so committed. Hezbollah is actually an Iranian mercenary, or if we had any doubt in the past, we now see that Iran is launching Hezbollah out of Lebanon, exposing it to conflict with these organizations as mercenary. In Syria, in a place that is not a territorial attack, it's not even in Lebanon, just because Iran is ordering it to do so. And Hezbollah's main role, as far as Iran is concerned, is to pose a threat to Israel, and that is why Iran is being active in Syria and in other places in order to upgrade Hezbollah's weapons, to arm it with new advanced weapons that can pose a threat to Israel, to Israeli facilities and civilians. And we, of course, cannot allow ourselves to have Iran hold these proxies in the south, in the north, and we must, in these years and in this coming period, to put in place a policy and a strategy to sever the two Iranian arms, Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north. They pose a threat. And tomorrow we're not going to attack Lebanon, but we are certainly monitoring the situation and are very alert, and we will not allow Hezbollah to become a threat to Israel in the sense that it can paralyze it. And the strategy vis-à-vis Hezbollah, while creating deterrence, is a complete understanding that the state of Lebanon, including all its elements, that what was will not happen again. I'm saying this both as a Minister of Intelligence and as a Minister of Transportation. We will not allow, in the case of an escalation, to have our aerial and naval ports paralyzed like we've been threatened with. Any such action will be responded to and will take Iran back to many years back. We will not allow, as it used to be, to isolate Lebanon. If we have a campaign, it will be a broad, across-the-board campaign in order to paralyze this action that is being done through Hezbollah by Iran. I think that is a task or a mission that should be mutual to all Western countries, to the United States, to the Arab countries, due to their own interests, some of which we have peace accords with, such as Egypt and Jordan, and of course we are collaborating with them to the best of our ability in these issues in order to prevent such a situation from happening, an Iranian capability that will cause this area to escalate according to its own wills and interests. Therefore, this conference that is dealing with counter-terrorism, as far as I'm concerned, as a minister in the government of Israel, it is part of a global campaign. I know that you, Mr. Ambassador, we have some disagreements about the nuclear agreement, and I think it is completely legitimate that the government of Israel is expressing its opinion against this agreement. Of course, it's an internal American point, but we are allowed to make our opinion known, because if we were not to do so, we would actually be taking away our own prerogative to talk about this as a threat to us. And I want to say this very clearly, because ever since Menachem Begin has decided the doctrine should be to stop the doctrine against the annihilation of the state of Israel. There's a new book out by Menachem Begin that even a president like Ronald Reagan said that he was against this, and even 4 F-16 aircraft were supposed to come but were stopped. And it said that years after the Gulf War, and when these things happened, they admitted, or they thanked those in Israel who were involved for the action that took place. So we will not allow this threat to become imminent to Israel. And we hope that we will not get there. But since we will not allow it, we will not support any agreement that we feel may lead to the situation of creating a nuclear threat to Israel. Therefore, I'm saying beyond this disagreement and whatever decisions America reaches internally, we are at the forefront of counter-terrorism. We feel the United States is a spearheader of this campaign, and Israel is an ally of the United States, and all the things that I have mentioned here. The lifting of the sanctions from Iran will only exacerbate this, and will only help them allocate resources, and there are many people engaging in intelligence who know very well what Iran is doing, even today when its resources are quite limited. And all these organizations that I have talked about, how it is funding, how it is sponsoring, arming, and operating them, activating them to go against Israel. And I think that we should be collaborating with one another. I think it should be a global interest against this terrorist infrastructure, so that organizations such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, and Hezbollah is really the head here, because it's being an armed mercenary, should not have the capability to change this situation. And of course, we as the State of Israel will take any action to prepare for such situations. I hope this conference continues on in its discussions. I would like to thank you for inviting me to this important event, and I hope there will not be many more tears either here or in heaven, and that it will be calm, there will be peace. I must say that today we are seeing the images from Europe. We are seeing how a problem that starts out in one place has an impact elsewhere. So no one, whether it's Europeans or anyone else, we cannot ignore what is happening. Even those who thought they could ignore what is happening or can let threats develop and take place, eventually, in some way or another, the outcomes come to everyone, and I hope the entire world will prepare in order to uproot this terrorist infrastructure in all organizations, all countries that I talked about, in order to stabilize the world. Thank you.